By the time Caesar Augustus arrived back in Rome during the autumn of the 19 BC year, his popularity with both his legions and with the common people of Rome had reached such monumental proportions that the Senate voted to commemorate the Princeps Civitatus's entrance into the city with celebratory games in his honor, the Ludi Augustelia. Roman games were traditionally dedicated to the gods. The Neptunalia was the holiday which celebrated the god Neptune, as the annual Ludi Magellances celebrated the goddess Magna Mater. Caesar Augustus, son of the deified Julius Caesar, now became the first mere mortal to whom Roman games were dedicated. His visit to the eastern Roman provinces, spanning the 20 BC and 19 BC years, not only concluded his politically expedient and highly publicized campaign to return to Rome her missing eagle standards and prisoners of war, but beyond his business with Parthia, Augustus unintentionally stumbled into a rebellion against Egypt. A revolt led by the Meroitic Candoci, Queen Amanarinas, against the Egyptian towns within the Thebaid had embroiled Rome in a power struggle with Egypt. For nearly 6.5 centuries, Pharaonic Egypt and the Kingdom of Kush were at each other's throats as a result of the downfall of the last Kushite ruler of Egypt, Pharaoh Tantamani of the 25th dynasty. However, following the death of Queen Cleopatra, Egypt had been annexed by Rome, and Queen Amanarinas now faced new dynamics. Rome responded. The Candoci had bitten off more than she could chew. Her forces were quickly overwhelmed by those of Caesar's Roman prefect, Gaius Petronius, leaving the Kushite queen no alternative but to negotiate for peace, an altogether acceptable outcome in the eyes of Caesar Augustus. After all, why commit Rome's legions to a war in unfamiliar territories inhabited by an enemy the Romans knew little about, only to risk succumbing to diseases and pathogens lethal to Romans? By withdrawing Rome's forces from the 30 miles of territory it had conquered under the generalship of Petronius, while maintaining a 12-mile buffer zone between Egypt and Ethiopia, Caesar Augustus could negotiate a treaty which would not only add Kush to Rome's long list of client states, but would simultaneously boost Rome's economy by expanding trade all the way into Ethiopia. Another windfall was to benefit Rome's coffers. A valuable resource was discovered in one of Caesar Augustus' provinces. As Cantabrian guerrilla and terrorist attacks continued against Roman occupation of Hispania, the legions fighting to protect Hispania's wealth of silver mines also happened upon gold. As Hispania's net worth increased, so did the health of Rome's treasury. There were now many feathers in the cap of Caesar Augustus. With the floodwaters of the Tiber River having receded, a devastating plague finally at an end, and with all regions save the farthest frontiers now enjoying peace, the Senate had taken advantage of Caesar's absence to reinstate its traditional administration of Roman government. But could Augustus allow history to move backwards? Every senator who had lived during the times of the dictator Julius Caesar and the years of the Second Triumvirate had the template for taking control of Rome's mighty empire, having witnessed the winning strategies. The idea of returning to representative government, bound by the consent of the people, was a powerfully nostalgic notion, but served only to idealize a form of government that few alive remembered, painting it as pure and untarnished, while overlooking the fact that it had given rise to corruption among Rome's top political families, both patrician and plebeian, who had abused that system for personal and financial gain, all the while protecting one another from any consequences. Even after the deaths of Cleopatra and Marcus Antonius, which trumpeted an official end to the civil wars, the game had already started anew. Augustus had put aside his extraordinary powers and, with the blessing of the Senate, had divided Rome into public provinces, managed by the Senate, and imperial provinces overseen by Caesar Augustus. And what had happened? The Roman governors posted to the public provinces, as well as the legates in charge of his own imperial provinces, began racking up one triumph after another. In their pursuit of military honors, senatorial generals and Caesarian legates alike aggressively pushed into new territories, as Gaius Cornelius Gallus had done in Egypt, where they hoped to expand Rome's borders, be hailed imperator on the field of battle, and ultimately be granted a triumph in Rome. By placing his own name on all those triumphs, forcing each triumphator to share the honor with him, Caesar Augustus likely sought to curtail the competition for military greatness, considering it to be at the root of every civil war since that of Marius and Sulla, and somewhat responsible for the divisions that had destroyed the sense of unity and cohesion that was the very identity of Rome herself. Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla each had legions loyal to them, and many Romans died. Julius Caesar and Pompeius Magnus had divided Rome's legions between themselves, and Romans continued to die. Caesar Augustus and Marcus Antonius also divvied up Roman legions, and each used them to kill his opponents. Legions loyal to opposing generals was not good for Rome. For Caesar Augustus to give control of Rome's legions to the Senate, now that they were finally unified under a single commander, was to invite continued military competition between generals who presumed themselves equal to Caesar Augustus. And so, upon his arrival in Rome in 19 BC, the Princeps Civitatis entered into a third round of constitutional settlement negotiations with the Senate. The first constitutional settlement had taken place on January the 13th of the 27 BC year. This settlement had given Caesar Augustus autonomous authority over Egypt, Syria, Cyprus, Cilicia, Illyricum, Gaul, and most of Hispania, leaving the remainder of Rome's provinces in the hands of the Senate. The second constitutional settlement was enacted in June or July of the 23 BC year. This settlement gave Caesar Augustus the tribunicia potestas, or authority of a tribune of the plebs, without the responsibility attached to the office. Under the tribunicia potestas, Caesar Augustus had the right to legally veto any magistrate, senator, or assembly which did not suit him, or even the actions of the Senate as a whole. In the second constitutional settlement, Caesar Augustus also received the right to summon the Senate to a meeting at any time, and was granted the ius prima relationis, giving him the right to speak first at Senate meetings. He was also made cura animi, and put in charge of Rome's grain supply. Outside the city, only while visiting the provinces, Caesar Augustus was granted the imperium maius proconsulari, or proconsular imperium, giving him not only the right to govern his own provinces autonomously, but also the right to interfere in any other governor's province, if he deemed it necessary. At the third constitutional settlement of 19 BC, Caesar Augustus was made curator legum et morum, or supervisor of laws and morals, for a period of 10 years. He was also given Augustan imperium, or imperium equal to a sitting consul. There is still disagreement among historians as to whether this imperium was granted for life or for specific periods of time, renewable at expiration. But the Augustan imperium gave Caesar Augustus the permanent right to sit between the two consular chairs at all Senate meetings, effectively making him Rome's third consul at all times. Being given the Augustan imperium also bestowed on Caesar Augustus the legal authority to command troops within Rome's sacred pomerium, to act as a judge at trials, and even to call for a census of the empire. Owing to the tribunicia potestas, the imperium maius proconsulare, the cura annonae, the curator legum et morum, and the Augustan imperium, all avenues of authority buttressed by his sole command of Rome's legions, Caesar Augustus now had the ability to discreetly move between offices, deliberately keeping the legalities of his administration vague so as to legislate, veto, adjudicate, dictate, and moralize as he saw fit, all under the auspices of one office or another. By the end of 19 BC or beginning of 18 BC, the very person of Caesar Augustus represented the physical embodiment of Rome. Although it appeared as though the Princeps Civitatis held each office in accordance with republican traditions, having the full support of the Senate, Many of the offices were created specifically for Caesar Augustus, having never previously existed within republican government. With the civil wars now past, and his own grip on government now secure, Caesar Augustus installed a marble memento of dedication known as the Fasti Triumphalis in the Forum Romanum. This decorative relief was inscribed with the names of every general who had ever triumphed during Rome's long history, alongside the names of whichever men had held the consulships in the corresponding years. The first name in the top corner of the Fasti Triumphalis was Romulus, for his defeat against King Acron in 753 BC. The final name carved into the bottom corner of the Fasti Triumphalis was Cornelius Balbus, the general who had celebrated a triumph while Caesar Augustus was in the east. Curiously, the Fasti Triumphalis was fashioned by Caesar Augustus in such a way that it left no room for any future names to be added, formally putting an end to Roman triumphs. By capturing the love of the common people, and maintaining the illusion of cooperation with the Senate by avoiding populist methods, while moulding Rome's legions into a single cohesive military machine unswervingly loyal to himself, Caesar Augustus now formally took his position as head of the Roman state. Talk of returning to the sanity of a republic finally began to die out as Rome's new emperor, Caesar Augustus, implanted himself as head of the Roman Empire, just as Marcus Antonius had said he would. This concludes Series 10, highlighting the political maneuvers used to solidify Caesar Augustus' power. Please join us for Series 11, where we will begin our examination of the Julio-Claudians. Thank you for watching.